What's up, guys? So I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. Like many of you, one of the reasons I enjoy the show so much is because it's true to life. It depicts a very real, visceral, and violent world, and one which, according to George R. Martin, is based on real-life history and events. This show has a strange effect where, every time it shocks us, kills a character we like, shows evil triumphing over good, or adding any number of unexpected turns, we keep coming back and for whatever reason, staying absorbed with what we're watching. I would argue that the reason we keep watching is because we feel like this show is realistic. Every time a shocking event happens, we see a new Machiavellian truth about the world, a truth about the real nature of power, relationships, and the way the world of politics actually works. George R. Martin has said himself that Italian writer Niccolò Machiavelli was a major influence on his writing. So, here are my 5 Machiavellian lessons that we are supposed to learn from Game of Thrones. Number 1. Honor is a handicap. This is a major lesson, and one which we learned the hard way from watching the first season. To the credit of the show's creators, we meet the character Ned Stark from the very beginning, and he becomes for us our major point of view character. He becomes our protagonist, the character we identify the most with, and this is what makes it so devastating when he's killed at the end of season 1. But there is a lesson here, and the show's creators have manipulated us to teach us a lesson about the world. And the lesson to be gotten from the story of Ned is that he dies because he is too honorable. In the world of Game of Thrones, honor is a handicap. If you're competing with someone who is without honor, like Littlefinger for example, you're giving yourself an additional disadvantage by limiting the number of decisions that are available to you. So Ned makes a number of naive decisions, because he thinks all the other characters are operating with the same code of honor that he does. He tells Cersei that he knows about the incest, which gives her time to organize a response. He rejects Littlefinger's idea to support the Lannisters. And finally, when Renly comes with the idea to take the Lannister children hostage, Ned refuses once again, as to do so would be dishonorable. Big mistake, Ned. Big mistake. Number 2. Betrayal happens. So this idea kind of builds on the previous one, and it extends the idea that the principles we use to govern our personal lives, things like trust, fairness, and loyalty, do not apply and cannot apply in a political world. When Littlefinger betrays Ned, when the Boltons betray the Starks, we see characters operating in a world where they have to give up their individual ideas of honor to look after their political self-interest. They see an opportunity and they capitalize on it, and they don't allow themselves to be handicapped by ideas of being honorable. We see a similar case with Daenerys when she steals the Unsullied. Here, unlike the other cases, we celebrate what Daenerys does even though it's dishonest, because at this point in the show we're starting to understand this real political world that these characters are functioning in, and Daenerys, as a good character, has shown she now knows how to function in this world. Number 3. Power is the appropriate use of violence. So one of the things I learned about Tudor England recently, and this is relevant because this is the history on which Game of Thrones is based, is it was a society much, much more violent than the society we live in today. You were 5 times more likely to die a violent death back then than today. So what this means in a world like this is that whoever had a monopoly on violence was the determiner of what justice was. So if I have more armies, then I decide what truth is. I decide what the law is. There are great quotes from characters on the show. There's one scene when Tyrion is talking with his father, and Tywin asks him what he thinks power is, and he says to his father, "I think armies are power." Littlefinger has another great quote when he suggests that Ned support the Lannisters, and Ned says, "No, we can't do that because it's treason." But Littlefinger says, "It's only treason if we lose." And that's absolutely true. Whoever wins the war, whichever army wins the war, decides if the incest is true or not. That's the way a world like this functions. So violence is very important. But notice I also said the appropriate use of violence. And if we watch the show carefully, there are great examples when violence is used wrongly and it causes a negative effect. The best example of this is when Joffrey orders the execution of Ned Stark. And as Tyrion mentions later, an entire war could have been avoided if they didn't execute Ned Stark's character. So in this case, this was an example of the inappropriate use of violence. Number 4, make sure your armies are loyal to you. So this is a lesson which comes straight out of Machiavelli. And in Machiavelli's book, The Prince, he says something like, always make sure your armies are loyal to you, and don't rely on people to fight for you who you can't trust in a dangerous situation. And we see this lesson time and again on the show. We see this Ned and the city guard in season 1. We see this with Cersei, who gives arms to the Faith Militant in season 5. We see this with the Good Masters in the Unsullied. We see this with Robb Stark and the Boltons. So time and again we see this lesson unfold, and each time it's a hard lesson for the character on the receiving end to learn. And number 5, it's better to be feared than loved. So this is another line straight out of Machiavelli. We see the best example of it in the story of Tywin Lannister. The story goes that Tywin was the son of Tytos Lannister, and Tytos was the lord of the Westerlands. He was generous and kind, but all of his vassals, instead of liking him for being good, instead began to hate him because he didn't command their respect. So the story goes that Tywin, he raises an army and puts down an uprising by the most powerful house, House Rain of Castamere, and he utterly destroys them and crushes them, and he makes their family extinct. And of course, this is the start of the song, The Rains of Castamere. And after Tywin does this, all the families in the Westerlands become loyal to the Lannisters, and they don't have any more problems. So the lesson is, if you try to make people like you in this political world, human nature will make people not like you, but instead take advantage of you for being good to them. So this is another lesson, that you have to be cruel when it's appropriate. So that's what I have. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned as I may have 5 more Machiavellian lessons of Game of Thrones coming soon.